Single customer view is just a data concept. Performance comes from
We are moving from simple campaign execution to agentic execution, where decisions aren't predefined by journeys, they are made in the moment based on the. So if your data isn't ready for that shift, your campaigns will always lag behind your customer.
What you end up with is a single customer view that's accurate, but it's hours old. And that lag is where relevance breaks down completely.
What you are seeing with teams that have done everything right and are still not able to see better results.
The data exists, it's technically unified, but it's not usable in the way that most teams think it is. If a customer just clicked on a product 10 minutes ago, and your system should be able to immediately change.
If your customer data can't influence decisions in real time in your systems, you don't have a single customer view. You have a historical record.
Segment, journey, you send, that model. Now that's being replaced by
If you are using Salesforce and have a single customer view setup and your campaigns still feel generic, then today's video is for you. Because here's what's changing right now. We are moving from simple campaign execution to agentic execution, where decisions aren't predefined by journeys, they are made in the moment based on the customer context. So if your data isn't ready for that shift, your campaigns will always lag behind your customer. Hi there, I'm Chintan Doshi. I head the CRM and Lifecycle marketing team at Mavlers, and joining me today is my dear friend Matt Kelly, who is our growth strategy partner here at Mavlers. So in today's video, we'll be covering three things majorly: why single customer view doesn't automatically improve campaign performance, what agentic execution actually means for how your team operates, and whether your team is actually ready for that shift or not. Let's get into that particular pointers, Matt, and welcome to this video.
Thank you, Chintan. Thanks for having me.
Matt, so you are currently and constantly talking to multiple clients and peers across the industry. What you are seeing with teams that have done everything right, we are talking about teams that have invested in their tech stack, have unified their profiles, and are still not able to see better results. What's actually happening there?
Honestly, you're right. This is the most common conversation that I'm having right now. I hear customers say and tell me that the data exists, it's technically unified, but it's not usable in the way that most teams think it is. I think what we need to understand in just all the time that I've been consulting customers on Marketing Cloud and Data Cloud is that there's a difference between identity, nailing identity, and usability. Identity means that you're connecting the customer record, the CRM, website behavior, purchase history, they're all stitched together. But most brands they've solved the identity problem and it just still doesn't work. But usability means that data is available at your execution layer at the moment that a decision needs to be made. So for example, if a customer just clicked on a product 10 minutes ago, and your system should be able to immediately change what you show them next, instantly, not the next morning. And that's where the setups fall short. What you end up with is a single customer view that's accurate, but it's hours old, and sometimes even days old. And that lag is where relevance breaks down completely. So Chin, let me give you an example that I think is helpful for the viewers to understand this a little bit better. So imagine that a customer browses a product on Tuesday. They abandoned the cart for whatever reason, something came up, and then they come back Thursday to make the purchase. What most setups are set up for is batch-based engagement, and that means that the data is not processed continuously. It's not real time. Rather, it's processed on scheduled intervals. So what could happen is the browser event is captured, but it's processed only at the next scheduled sync, which might be, in this case, weekly. That means the segment that customer is in does not inform their next visit on Thursday when they come back to make that purchase. What they see on the site might be completely different than what you could be showing them, which is something that's a lot more relevant. So if you zoom out and imagine you're the customer in this example, you've just received an email saying XYZ item is still waiting in your cart. Meanwhile, you're on the site buying it, right? And that relevancy moment is broken. You've missed it. I think that's where the gap is. And it's not that you're personalizing in a wrong way, it's that your system is making the right decision, but the information informing that decision is just out of date, right? And I think it matters to make sure that those real-time moments happen and are relevant for the customer.
You are right, Matt, because technically speaking, nothing went wrong. The segment was built correctly, the journey fired exactly it was designed, but both are built on static snapshot of that customer rather than the real-time profile. That is the core limitation of segment then send, because it assumes customer behavior is stable long enough for systems to process and act. But in reality, you have to remember that customer intent shifts in hours, and sadly, most systems which are built currently activates in cycles, like in days and weeks, and that has mismatch, and normally that's where the relevance dies.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that there's one thing that I see happen pretty commonly that makes it a little bit worse is the way that the teams are structured that support this kind of experience. We've got data teams, and then we have CRM execution teams, and often they're working in silos. Data teams are building audiences and signals, and then they hand that over to the CRM team to build the journeys on top of that. And because there's a gap in between the two, the data gets handed off, and then by the time it's used, it's already old, right? It's out of date. And so even when both teams are doing their job well, the output or the experience is still behind and irrelevant.
Yep. And to add on, I always keep on saying to all our customers, if your customer data can't influence decisions in real time in your systems, you don't have a single customer view. You have a historical record. At that point, it's just an added reporting layer, right? Instead of what it should have been, a system built to keep your help you make sure that you take a right decision in terms of sending the messages.
Yeah, exactly. I think when I have conversations about this, I often say that the phrase unified doesn't mean the same thing as usable, right? Unified just means that the data lives in one place, but usability is more about the system being able to act on it. That's where Agentic AI is helping us move forward, because these agents are able to do that as long as you give them the right data.
Love that framing, Matt, and you are right. That gap, whether it's delayed data, batch processing, or outdated audience qualification, that gap is precisely what Agentic AI or Agentic execution is solving. And I know that a lot of teams, and we would have heard multiple times, everyone is talking about Agentic AI, but haven't quite understood what it actually changes into that day-to-day execution. So I'll try to elaborate. Today, most campaigns work like this. A CRM manager defines the audience, wait for the segment to populate, then they build a journey and schedules a send. There are multiple human decisions and time gaps sitting between a customer signal and a message actually going out of the system. Agentic execution removes these gaps, meaning what used to happen was, let's say a customer does something, let's say they browsed a product, the example which you shared, then that customer gets added to a segment in the next batch and they enter a pre-built journey. So they receive a scheduled message hours later. That was a norm, right? Now with agentic execution, we have a customer who browses a product. This event updates the customer profile in real time, not into like batches, which used to happen earlier. The system evaluates the customer intent and almost instantly, and it automatically triggers the next best action in that moment. So there is no scheduling, no waiting, no manual intervention. This is what we can do with agentic execution when data cloud is connected with marketing cloud personalization.
Absolutely. When it works properly, the difference is significant. I think both in terms of the customer experience and in revenue. Here's what that would look like. Let's go back to that same example. Your customer browses on Tuesday and buys on Thursday, right? So in an agentic setup, the moment that browse fires, the profile updates immediately. Not in the next sync or anything. It happens right then and there. The system checks whether the person has converted or not. And if not, they're still within the purchase consideration window. The right message goes out at the right time. So everything is relevant, timely, and based on what they actually did. I think you have to remember that it didn't happen because a marketer scheduled it. It happened because the system read a live signal and chose to act on it. And the message that was sent was based on exactly what was actually happening, not what a marketer predicted would happen. Now that's the shift that takes you from reactive to proactive, from running the same 3 campaign variants across every segment to setting up your system to respond differently. It's based on each individual, what they're actually doing right now, and it moves from batch sends on a calendar to messages that go out because your customer behavior triggered them. It's, the commercial impact is real. I think no longer like sending messages that get ignored, but showing up while the customer is still deciding. I think what that means, just to like summarize that, it's more conversations without increasing volume, higher revenue per customer interaction, and far less spend wasted on messages that arrive really before the decision could be influenced. That's what I think is happening.
Exactly the way you mentioned, Matt. That's how the shift is happening. And if you zoom out for a second from a platform standpoint, the shift is exactly what Salesforce has been building towards with a data cloud. What that means in practice is simpler. Your customer profile updates as event happens, not hours later, which typically used to happen earlier. And those signals, be it from web, email, mobile, can directly trigger across different channels without waiting on a manual handoff. Here is what that actually changes about how you actually build. Instead of creating a new journey every time you want to handle a situation or a scenario, whether that's a high intent browser or a cart abandoner or a lapsed buyer, you build a decision logic that handles all of these scenarios and situations at one place and routes each customer messaging based on their current signals. For example, let's try to understand with an example where a customer who has actually visited a product page thrice or let's say 3 times in one session gets a different response than someone who visited a page once 6 days ago. You see, that's the same product, but because it's completely different intent signal, an agentic system or an AI or an agentic AI treats them differently, fully automatically, whereas previously a journey based on system would have treated them with the same way unless a CRM team who had built separate journeys for each of those scenarios. So if you don't have a different journeys earlier, you would have received the same messaging. See, that's the difference. There are fewer journeys to maintain, like you don't need multiple versions or multiple journeys to be built into the platform. Now there are smarter responses at an individual level and across different channels. Like you don't need to send same messaging across email, in-app push, and SMS. You can have customized based on the signals. And now we have a system that's get more accurate over time rather than more complicated, which used to happen when you have multiple journeys and data to manage.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why, to all the viewers that are watching this, stop asking, what journey should this customer be in? And start asking, what is this customer signaling right now that we can come up with the right response to that signal? Let me give you a couple ways that plays out in practice. So let's say a customer who just browsed your highest margin product twice today, let's say they're signaling purchase intent, right? So here, the right response is to have an immediate relevant nudge as opposed to having that nudge in the next email in the next nurture sequence, right? Another example might be a customer who's been dormant for 60 days, all of a sudden opens an email, right? Like that might be a signal for re-engagement, most likely. And the right response to that here is to set up something that earns that attention as opposed to sending a promotional blast about something unrelated. I think, if I were to come up with one last example that might illustrate this, I can give you, let's say a customer who abandoned a cart at checkout. There's friction there, right? I mean, that's typically what's happened. Whether it's pricing, hesitation, or distraction, in all these cases, the right response might be a timely reminder, just reassurance, and maybe an incentive or a discount, perhaps, which it's very different from somebody who just browsed once and then just left, right? So I think the same platform and the same tools, we're talking about, data cloud, marketing cloud here, you're seeing completely different results depending on whether you're thinking in terms of audiences or in terms of individual signals.
Yep, absolutely. And look, I want to add this one thing, because here's what I've been seeing a lot of teams make, like this common mistake where they go live with the data cloud and expect the results to change automatically. So as a brand, you invest in a platform, they set up the integration with all the tech stack, and then 6 months later, all the campaigns are still exactly looking the same it was earlier. Because even though the data is flowing in the system, they didn't change the activation model, right, which was required. Their journeys are still batch triggered, their segments are still static. So naturally, their campaigns are still driven by the set schedule instead of being real time behavior driven, which Data Cloud enables. So you have to remember one thing: the platform doesn't change your result. It's just one medium, right? You have to change how you use Salesforce platform, be it Data Cloud or Marketing Cloud next. And for this, you need to honestly take a look at what your current setup is actually doing for you in terms of the results, in terms of the outcome. Which brings us to the most important and the harder part of this conversation, which I'm curious to understand from your end, Matt. What you are seeing today, are most teams set up and operate like this?
Yeah, I'd say most recently in a lot of the conversations that I've had, I've come across a lot of scenarios where they're just they're not ready. They have these tools though, right? They've worked with Salesforce, they've partnered closely, they have what they need. But to your point, as you just explained, it's not configured in a way that's able to capitalize on all the innovation that they've just brought on to their Salesforce environment. It's not criticism, it's just reality. Okay, and I'm only acknowledging where the maturity curve actually is and people wanting to activate all of this stuff. So, to take a step back. So across all the accounts that we work with around the world, in my time helping Mavlers as a growth strategy partner, we see the same three gaps. So the first, the customer profiles just aren't fully reliable. We hear this all the time, right? And meaning that the key data points they're either missing, fields aren't filled out by their sales team, their support team, whoever might be touching those records. They're duplicated. There's lots of messiness in records that might have been auto-created from different workflows, and they're not properly connected. So when your system tries to make a decision, it's doing that on an incomplete picture of what that customer has actually done and who they actually are. I think secondly, in your event tracking, it's often inconsistent, meaning that some actions are tracked and some aren't. And so when you're firing some of these 2 or 3 times and you're capturing multiple different things, instead of understanding real-time customer behavior, the system is reacting to distorted inputs. And sometimes it's not clear exactly which ones are real and which ones are duplicative or unnecessary. And you're basically ending up with a misfired campaign in the name of personalization, that's not really what the customer experiences. They experience a mess. I think finally, the third thing that a lot of these conversations center around is that there's no real-time decision layer. Okay, there might be some real-time tracking, there might be some real-time observability, but the decision on what to do about it just isn't there yet, right? So the impact there is that you have always this late message, this irrelevant message that's being delivered across not just email, but multiple different channels. As CRM leaders, we have to remember that being late is just irrelevant. And if it's irrelevant, it's going to get ignored. It's just not valuable, right? I think people have to understand that just because you have Salesforce Marketing Cloud, it doesn't mean that you're ready for agentic execution. There's a lot of excitement about that. I think people are really interested in activating that. But investing in Data Cloud does not mean that you're ready for the future, right? It just means you have a project on your hands that you need a partner like Mavlers to come in and help you figure out. I think now you need to build a foundation underneath all of it so that it's solid, because otherwise you're spending heavily on Salesforce for the same level of execution that you could get at a much lower spend, a much lower tech solution, right? You have a lot of power, you're just not bringing it to life.
This is such an important point because Salesforce has leaped forward. The gap between what the platform can do and what most teams are actually executing is wider than it ever have been. That's not a bad thing actually, but you have to know where you are on that maturity model, right, or curve, as Matt mentioned. And what I would like to recommend our viewers watching this video is a simple self-assessment questionnaire. So basically there are 3 questions that can help you identify if your current setup is actually built for using Salesforce in the best way possible or not. And the way it goes is, the first one is, how fresh is your customer data at the point of activation? And when I mention this question, I don't mean your CDP or data warehouse. I mean at the exact point or a moment when you send a message or the message is getting triggered out of the system, see if your answer is anything like hourly, daily, or an overnight sync. Then I'm sorry to say, but you are operating in session or in real time. You have been targeting based on stale intent, and stale intent means there is a lower probability of conversion or interaction. Secondly, how many of your active journeys are triggered by customer behavior versus how many of them are scheduled sends? So I recommend you to take a look and let's audit your top 10 journeys and see if they are triggered by customer events. The events could be like browsing the products, browsing the website, cart amendment, or it could be user login or user activity on your mobile, be it reviewing your app, right, or interacting with your email, SMS, or if they are real-time scheduled sends, as we discussed, like daily, weekly, or email. Because if most of your emails are schedule driven, then you are still running batch and blast, and you need a better segmentation. And then the third question would be, is your event tracking audited and standardized? If you can't answer that question with a specific date when you last audited it, it means there is almost certainly a gap, and those gaps compound everything downstream. So ensure you are clear on your event taxonomy and you follow consistent naming convention. Have deduplication logic in place and ensure that identity is attached to each and every event.
Yeah, Chintan, I love these questions because they tell you exactly where the next optimization needs to be done. For instance, if you find out that data isn't fresh, then it's a real-time activation problem. But if campaigns are mostly scheduled, the issue is the execution model. If tracking isn't reliable, then the data instrumentation is likely where your problem lies. And all three directly come back to revenue. The revenue impact is exactly why this optimization is necessary, and just it's not an option. Because most teams are operating at this like batch maturity stage, the ecosystem has already moved on to event-driven CRM, especially with Agentic AI. So what used to work as the like segment, then you have the journey, and then you send, that model, now that's being replaced by event, decision, action, an agentic model. So if your system isn't set up to be able to inform that or to make that shift, you'll keep adding more journeys, more segments. You might turn into micro segments where you have so many that are just very, very like finely tuned, but performance won't scale. Okay, so here's a takeaway that I want people to come away with. So if you want to move toward real time, start here. First, operationalize one high intent event and pick any one of these. It could be product view, cart activity, checkout start. Next, you want to take that and set up a real-time trigger and a response to that trigger, because this will be the fastest way for you to prove incremental lift from this new way of engaging. Secondly, run a full tracking audit, which means validate the event coverage, event accuracy, identity resolution, because without this, nothing downstream is going to work properly. It's always going to be disconnected. Thirdly, convert one batch campaign into an event-triggered campaign. So in practical ways, this would look like taking a high volume scheduled campaign and just rebuilding it as an event-driven flow. When you do this, you'll immediately see higher engagement and higher conversion, most likely, right? Like this is how our customers are coming back to us and saying that it's impacted them. You see, single customer view is just a data concept, okay? Performance comes from activation. That's the takeaway from this video that I want you all to walk away with, okay? If your system can't act on customer events in real time, you have a delayed message. And that delayed message doesn't convert.
Love that, Matt, and thanks for sharing the last line. Like single customer view is just a data concept, and actually what matters is performance, which comes out of activation. And I'm so glad that we could address all those points today. Thanks for all your insights, and thanks to all our viewers watching this video. In the next video, we are going to break down on where technical debt actually builds up inside your CRM systems, and how to assess whether your current setup is truly ready to scale. So be sure that you are subscribed to our channel for that. Thanks a lot, Matt, for giving these lovely insights. I'm sure the audience would have enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you all for joining in. We'll see you on the next one.